Let me straighten one thing out. I'm not lazy. I never have been, and I never will be. But good luck convincing my family of that. To them, I was Olivia, can't even fold a towel right Hayes, the black sheep who couldn't keep a job, clean her room, or contribute anything worthwhile to the household. Spoiler alert, none of it was true. Okay, fine. Maybe the towel folding part, but come on. How hard is it to just toss them in a drawer and call it done? Growing up, I always felt like I was trying to catch up in a game where no one bothered to explain the rules. My older brother Lucas, perfect grades, varsity soccer captain, and according to Mom, basically a future rocket scientist. Then there was Sophia, my younger sister, with her angelic choir voice and award-winning art projects. And me, I was the middle child, the walking disappointment. They didn't even try to hide it. Oh, Olivia, could you at least clear your dishes without being reminded 3 times? Mom would say during dinner, her voice dripping with exasperation. Liv, can you stop scrolling on your phone and help out around here for once? Dad would add, shaking his head like my very existence offended him. Even Sophia got in on it. Once, when I asked her to pass the salt, she rolled her eyes and muttered, maybe if you helped more, people would actually like having you around. Like? Having me around? That one stung. Here's the thing, though. I did help. Sure, I didn't bake cookies or organize the garage like Lucas did, but I handled the stuff no one else wanted to touch. I scrubbed the grout in the bathroom until my hands turned pruny. I sorted recycling bins while everyone else complained about the smell. Heck, I even fixed the leaky faucet under the kitchen sink after Dad spent an hour cursing at it. Did anyone notice? Nope. All they saw was someone lounging on the couch staring at their phone. By the time I turned 22, I'd had enough. Enough of the sideways glances, the passive-aggressive comments, the assumption that I was some kind of freeloader mooching off their generosity. So I made a decision, one that still gives me goosebumps when I think about it. I moved out. Not to some fancy apartment downtown or a cozy studio near campus. No, I went full survival mode. I rented a tiny 1-bedroom above a laundromat. The place had peeling wallpaper, a fridge that hummed louder than a jet engine, and a view of the alley where stray cats fought over scraps of food. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The day I left, my family barely blinked. You'll be back in a month, Lucas said smugly, leaning against the doorway as I lugged boxes to my car. Mark my words. Sophia pouted dramatically. Who's going to help me practice for auditions now? And Mom? She hugged me tightly, whispering, take care of yourself, sweetheart. But don't forget, home is always here if you need it. If only she knew how badly I needed to leave. The first few weeks were rough, like eat ramen for every meal and cry in the shower rough. Rent was due, bills piled up, and my bank account looked like a sad little puddle of pennies. But slowly, things started falling into place. I picked up shifts at a coffee shop downtown, learned how to cook meals that didn't involve microwaves, and discovered the joy of thrift store shopping. For the first time in forever, I felt free. Then came the text messages. Mom, how's the new place? Everything okay? Lucas, still alive? Or did you starve yet? Sophia, miss you. Can we hang soon? At first, I ignored them, let them stew in their own guilt for pushing me away. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. Me, why? What's wrong? Their responses came flooding in almost immediately. Mom, oh, nothing major. Just things are a bit hectic here without you. Lucas, yeah, turns out keeping a house running is harder than it looks. Who knew? Sophia, pools come home. We messed up. Messed up? That was putting it mildly. Apparently, my departure had triggered a chain reaction of chaos. Without me to pick up the slack, the household fell apart faster than a poorly constructed IKEA bookshelf. Laundry piled up in mountains, dishes overflowed from the sink onto the counters. And poor Sophia, who, shockingly, didn't know how to operate a vacuum cleaner, was convinced spiders were taking over the living room. Part of me wanted to laugh. Karma really did have a sense of humor, but another part of me, the bigger, more stubborn part, felt vindicated. Finally, they saw me, not as lazy Olivia, but as someone who mattered, someone whose absence left a gaping hole they couldn't ignore. Still, I didn't rush to their rescue. If anything, I leaned further into my independence. Every late-night shift at the coffee shop, every DIY repair I tackled in my crumbling apartment, every small victory I celebrated alone, it all reinforced the truth I'd known all along. I wasn't lazy. I was capable, and damn proud of it. Moving out felt like shedding an old skin, one that had been too tight, too itchy for years. But freedom isn't free, and the cost was higher than I expected. Rent, groceries, utilities, it all added up faster than I could keep track. Every paycheck seemed to vanish before I even cashed it, leaving me with nothing but a sinking feeling in my stomach. Still, I refused to call home. Not for money, not for advice, not for anything. At first, surviving felt like a full-time job. My morning started early at the coffee shop, where I juggled orders while dodging steam burns from the espresso machine. The hours dragged, but I didn't mind. There was something satisfying about pouring my energy into something tangible, watching customers leave with their lattes and muffins, knowing I'd played a small part in brightening their day. Evenings were lonelier. After closing up shop, I'd trudge back to my apartment above the laundromat, greeted by the rhythmic hum of washing, machines below. Sometimes I'd sit on the fire escape, sipping instant noodles and watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. Other times, I'd lie on the couch, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, wondering if my family missed me as much as I secretly missed them. But pride kept me quiet. Meanwhile, chaos reigned at home, or so I gathered from Sophia's increasingly desperate texts. Sophia, live PS. Mom burned dinner again. Lucas says he's too busy to help. Sophia, also, there's mold in the fridge. What do we do? Sophia, I'm serious. Come back. We'll pay you. I smirked at her last message but didn't reply. Let them figure it out. A week later, though, curiosity got the better of me. I called Sophia during my lunch break, pretending it was just a casual check-in. Hey, I said when she picked up. How's everything going? There was a long pause, followed by a heavy sigh. Everything's fine. Really? Because your texts say otherwise? She groaned. Okay, fine. It's bad, like really bad. Mom tried to iron a shirt with the steam setting on max and almost set the house on fire. Lucas refuses to take out the trash unless someone pays him. And Dad? He just sits in his recliner yelling at the TV like it owes him money. I bit back a laugh. Sounds rough. It is rough, she snapped. We need you, Liv. Please, just come over for dinner or something. Bring your magic touch. My magic touch. You know what I mean. You always made everything work without complaining. None of us realized how much you did until you left. Her words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd told myself they didn't see me, that they didn't care. Hearing Sophia admit otherwise felt like standing in front of a mirror after years of avoiding my reflection. I'll think about it, I said finally, hanging up before she could argue. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories flooded back. Mom asking me to fold laundry, Dad shaking his head at my laziness, Sophia rolling her eyes when I asked for help. They weren't just labels, they were weights, pinning me down until I couldn't breathe. But now I had space to unpack those feelings, to examine them without judgment. Was I angry? Sure. Hurt? Absolutely. But beneath it all was a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that maybe, just maybe, this could be a chance to rewrite our story. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I showed up unannounced on a Saturday afternoon, armed with cleaning supplies and a playlist of upbeat music. When Sophia opened the door, her face lit up like Christmas morning. You came, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. Now, I replied, stepping inside. But don't get used to it. The house was exactly as she'd described. Messy, chaotic, and slightly overwhelming. Dishes piled high in the sink, clothes strewn across the living room floor, and an unmistakable smell of rotting vegetables wafting from the kitchen. Where's everyone else? I asked, tying my hair into a messy bun. Mom's at yoga, Dad's napping, and Lucas is working on a project, she said, air quoting the last part. Of course he is, I muttered under my breath. We started in the kitchen, tackling the mountain of dishes together. As we worked, Sophia filled me in on the latest family drama. Lucas's failed attempts at cooking, Mom's newfound obsession with essential oils, Dad's mysterious refusal to leave the recliner. It's like, the house fell apart without you, she admitted, scrubbing a stubborn stain off a plate. Not true, I countered. You guys just didn't realize how much work goes into keeping it running. She nodded slowly, guilt flashing across her face. Yeah, I guess we didn't. By the time Mom returned from yoga, the kitchen sparkled, the living room was clutter-free, and the garbage bags were stacked neatly by the curb. She froze in the doorway, staring at the transformation like she'd walked into the wrong house. Olivia? She said softly, her voice trembling. What are you doing here? Helping, I replied simply, wiping my hands on a towel. Tears welled up in her eyes as she pulled me into a tight hug. Thank you, she whispered. We've missed you. For a moment, I let myself lean into the embrace, soaking in the warmth I'd denied myself for months. But then I stepped back, crossing my arms. This doesn't fix everything, I said firmly. You can't treat me like I don't matter and then act surprised when I leave. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I know, and I'm so sorry. Later that evening, as I sat on the couch flipping through old photo albums, I realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about acknowledging the pain, owning the mistakes, and choosing to move forward anyway. Maybe my family would never fully understand what I'd gone through. Maybe they'd slip back into old habits. But for the first time in years, I felt seen, not as lazy Olivia, but as someone who mattered, and that was enough. The days following my impromptu cleaning spree at my parents' house were complicated. On one hand, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, like I'd finally proven my worth without saying a word. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this was just another band-aid on a wound that needed stitches. Sure, they apologized. Sure, they said they missed me. But actions speak louder than words, and so far, their actions hadn't changed much. Take dinner, for example. After spending hours scrubbing countertops and organizing cabinets, I expected some kind of acknowledgement, a thank you, or maybe even an offer to help. Instead, Mom breezed into the kitchen like she owned the place, which technically she did, and started prepping ingredients for lasagna without so much as a glance. In my direction. Need any help? I asked, leaning against the doorway. She waved me off dismissively. Oh, don't worry about it, sweetheart. You've done enough already. Translation. Go sit down and let me handle things. I clenched my fists, biting back a retort. This was classic Mom, treating me like I was incapable of contributing unless it involved manual labor. It wasn't subtle, but it stung all the same. Lucas showed up later, fresh from whatever project he'd been working on, and immediately commandeered the remote control. He sprawled across the couch like he owned the damn thing, scrolling through sports highlights while Sophia and I tried to have a conversation. You know, I said pointedly, raising my voice over the TV, it wouldn't kill you to pitch. And once in a while, he glanced up briefly, smirking. What? Like you used to? My jaw tightened. Excuse me? You heard me? He shot back, his tone dripping with condescension. Face it, Liv. You bailed on us, left us high and dry. Now you waltz back in here acting like some kind of savior? Give me a break. Sophia gasped, shooting him a glare. That's not fair, Lucas. No, it's fine, I interrupted, forcing a tight smile. Let him believe what he wants. Clearly nothing's changed around here. With that, I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, ignoring Mom's protests as I walked out. The cold air hit me like a slap, sharp and biting. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to get away. My feet carried me to the park a few blocks away, where I collapsed, onto a bench overlooking the pond. Ducks paddled lazily in the water, oblivious to my inner turmoil. Why had I come back? What did I expect would happen? That one afternoon of cleaning would magically erase years of resentment? That they'd suddenly see me as more than the lazy, middle child who couldn't measure up to Lucas or Sophia? Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away furiously. Crying wouldn't solve anything. Neither would running away again. Not really. But staying? Staying felt impossible too. Hours later, I returned home to find Sophia waiting for me on the front porch. She looked miserable, her knees pulled up to her chest and her arms wrapped tightly around herself. I'm sorry about Lucas, she said before I could say anything. He's an idiot. He's not wrong, though, I admitted, sitting beside her. I did leave. And yeah, it made things harder for everyone. But what choice did I have? Sticking around only made me feel worse. She nodded slowly, guilt flashing across her face. We didn't realize how bad it was for you. None of us did. That's the problem, I replied, staring at the ground. You never saw me. Not really. There was a long pause before she spoke again. What if we try again? She suggested hesitantly. Not like before, where you do everything and no one notices, but together, as a team. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. And what happens when things go back to normal? When you guys forget again? We won't, she insisted. I promise. Please, Liv. Just give us another chance. Her sincerity tugged at something deep inside me, a part of me that still wanted to believe in family, in connection, but trust wasn't something I could rebuild overnight. I'll think about it, I said finally, standing up. But don't make promises you can't keep. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. Slowly, awkwardly, but noticeably. Mom started delegating chores more evenly, assigning tasks based on ability rather than convenience. Dad actually left his recliner once in a while to help with yard work, though he grumbled about it the entire time. Even Lucas pitched in occasionally, though his efforts were half-hearted at best. Still, it wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard, and there were moments when frustration bubbled to the surface, like the time Mom asked me to organize the pantry and then criticized my method, or when Lucas accidentally broke the vacuum cleaner and blamed it on me. Each time, I reminded myself why I'd come back, to prove that I mattered, that my contributions weren't invisible. And each time I stood my ground, refusing to let them dismiss me again. One evening, after a particularly tense argument with Lucas, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Sophia. She was stirring a pot of soup, her brow furrowed in concentration. You're doing great, you know, she said suddenly, glancing up at me. Yeah? Doesn't feel like it, I muttered, leaning against the counter. It is, she insisted. You're teaching us how to be better, how to see each other instead of just expecting things to magically work out. Her words caught me off guard, knocking the wind out of me. For so long, I'd assumed I was the only one struggling. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. Thanks, I said softly, managing a small smile. She grinned back, nudging me playfully. Now stop being dramatic and taste this soup before I burn it. As I dipped a spoon into the simmering pot, I felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that maybe, just maybe, we could figure this out together. For a while, it almost felt like progress. Almost. Mom started asking for input on dinner plans instead of dictating them. Dad actually remembered to empty the dishwasher without being nagged. Well, most of the time. Even Lucas toned down his snarky comments, though he still rolled his eyes whenever I suggested rotating chores more evenly. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Not loud, obvious ones that demanded attention, but subtle fissures that threatened to undo everything we'd worked toward. Take laundry day, for example. It had always been my responsibility, not because anyone officially assigned it to me, but because no one else wanted to deal with it. So when Sophia volunteered to take over, I was skeptical, but willing to let her try. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, as she sorted piles of clothes into color-coded bins. "Last time you washed whites, they came out pink." "I've learned from my mistakes," she shot back, tossing a pair of jeans into the wrong bin. I sighed, resisting the urge to intervene. "Just double-check the detergent cap, okay? Too much can ruin the fabric." She waved me off, already humming along to whatever playlist she had blasting through her earbuds. Fine. It wasn't worth arguing over. 2 hours later, I found her standing in front of the washing machine, staring at the suds overflowing onto the floor. "What happened?" I asked, trying and failing to keep the irritation out of my voice. "The detergent kind of exploded," she admitted sheepishly, holding up the nearly empty bottle. "Kind of? Okay, fine, it totally exploded, but how was I supposed to know shaking it would make it foam everywhere?" I pinched the bridge of my nose, counting to 10 under my breath. "You're supposed to measure it, Soph, not shake it like it's a snow globe." Her face fell, guilt flashing across her features. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mess up." "It's fine," I lied, grabbing a mop. "Let's just clean this up before Mom sees it." As we scrubbed the floor together, I couldn't help but feel frustrated, not just at Sophia, but at myself. Why did I always end up fixing things? Wasn't the whole point of coming back to share the load? Then there was Lucas, who somehow managed to turn even the simplest tasks into disasters. One Saturday morning, Dad tasked him with mowing the lawn, a chore he'd avoided for years by claiming allergies or scheduling conflicts. "Don't worry, I've got this," he said confidently, strapping on a pair of sunglasses like he was auditioning for a gardening commercial. By noon, half the yard looked decent, but the other half resembled a war zone. Grass clippings littered the driveway, and the flower beds were trampled beyond recognition. "What the hell happened here?" I demanded, surveying the damage. Lucas shrugged, looking unbothered. "The mower kept stalling. I think it needs oil or something." "You think? Or you know?" He smirked, leaning against the fence. "Relax, Liv. It's just grass. It'll grow back." "That's not the point," I snapped, throwing up my hands. "The point is you didn't put in the effort to do it right." His smile faltered, replaced by a scowl. "Oh, come on. Don't act like you're perfect. You left us, remember?" My chest tightened, anger bubbling to the surface. "And whose fault is that? If any of you had bothered to acknowledge me, really see me, I wouldn't have needed to go." We stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Lucas muttered something under his breath and stalked inside, leaving me alone with the mess. Mom tried her best to mediate, but even she struggled to keep the peace. One evening, during yet another argument about who forgot to pay the water bill, she threw up her hands in exasperation. "This isn't working," she exclaimed, pacing the kitchen. "We're all trying, but nothing's changing." "Maybe because some people aren't pulling their weight?" I shot back, glaring at Lucas. "Oh, please," he countered, "like you don't enjoy playing. Martyr every chance you get." "That's not fair," Sophia interjected, stepping between us. "Liv's been doing way more than her share since she got back. Can't you see that?" "No," Lucas replied sharply. "All I see is someone who thinks she's better than everyone else." The room fell silent, his words hanging heavy in the air. My throat tightened, tears threatening to spill over. "Fine," I said finally, grabbing my keys from the counter. "If that's how you feel, maybe I should leave again." "Olivia, wait," Mom called after me, but I was already out the door. I drove aimlessly, the streets blurring past as tears streamed down my face. For months, I'd convinced myself that coming back could fix things, that I could force my family to see me, to value me. But now I wasn't so sure. Eventually, I ended up at the park where I'd gone after that first disastrous visit. The same ducks paddled lazily in the pond, oblivious to my pain. As I sat on the bench, replaying the fight in my head, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Sophia. "Sophia, please come home. We need you." I stared at the message, my heart aching. Did they really need me? Or were they just used to having me around to pick up the pieces? Before I could respond, another text came through, this time from Mom. "Mom, Olivia. Sweetheart, I'm sorry. We're trying, truly, but we can't do this without you." Her words hit me harder than I expected, not because they were perfect, but because they were honest. Still, forgiveness wasn't easy. Trust wasn't either. When I finally returned home, the house was quiet. Everyone was gathered in the living room, sitting awkwardly on opposite ends of the couch. "We talked," Mom began nervously, twisting her hands in her lap, "about what happened today. And we realized we've been unfair to you, Olivia. To all of us." Lucas nodded reluctantly, avoiding eye contact. Yeah, what I said earlier. It was out of line. I'm sorry. Sophia chimed in, her voice trembling. Me too. We shouldn't have treated you like that. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Their apologies felt genuine, but words weren't enough anymore. If you really mean that, I said finally, crossing my arms, then prove it. Stop expecting me to fix everything. Start seeing me. Not as lazy Olivia, not as the person who cleans up your messes, but as someone who matters, someone who belongs here. They exchanged glances, guilt etched across their faces. We will, Mom promised, reaching for my hand. We'll try harder, together. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start. Things didn't magically transform overnight. Let's be real. Change never works like that, especially when it comes to families as stubbornly flawed as mine. But in the weeks that followed our living room showdown, something shifted. Subtle at first, like the faintest crack of sunlight, breaking through a storm cloud, but undeniable all the same. Mom started small, little gestures that added up over time. She'd leave sticky notes on the fridge reminding everyone of their chores instead of nagging me to remind them. One morning, I found one stuck to my coffee mug. Thanks for always being here, Liv. Love you. It was cheesy, sure, but it made me smile. Dad, bless his grumpy heart, began taking initiative too. He fixed the leaky faucet himself instead of waiting for me to notice. And yes, he gloated about it afterward. Occasionally, he'd even join me outside while I watered the plants, offering unsolicited gardening tips that usually ended with us laughing over his ridiculous metaphors. Lucas? Well, Lucas remained Lucas. But there were moments, a rare compliment here, an unprompted effort to clean up after dinner there, that hinted at progress. Once, when I stayed late at work and missed family movie night, he texted me, "Your turn to pick next week." No chick flicks, though. Sophia became my unofficial partner in crime, tackling household chaos alongside me. Together, we turned laundry day into a mini event, blasting music and dancing around the basement like idiots. When she accidentally shrunk one of Mom's sweaters, we laughed until tears streamed down our faces, and then hid the evidence before anyone noticed. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. Old habits die hard, and sometimes they resurfaced without warning. Like the time Lucas forgot to take out the trash again, or when Sophia burned another batch of cookies because she got distracted scrolling through Instagram. Each slip-up tested my patience, reigniting old frustrations I thought I'd buried. But instead of snapping, or worse, retreating back into silence, I spoke up. You know, I said during breakfast one Saturday, it'd be nice if someone besides me remembered to sort recycling once in a while. Lucas groaned, burying his face in his hands. Not this again. Nope, I replied firmly, pointing my fork at him. This is happening. Because guess what? We're a team now. Or at least we're supposed to be. To my surprise, he sighed and nodded. Fine. Point taken. Mom raised an eyebrow, smirking slightly. Looks like Olivia's got her brother whipped. Hey, Lucas protested, tossing a piece of toast at her. We dissolved into laughter, the tension melting away as quickly as it had formed. Living together still came with its share of challenges, but slowly we began to find a rhythm. Chores rotated weekly, meals were planned collaboratively, and arguments, if they happened, were resolved with actual conversations instead of passive-aggressive comments. One evening, as we sat around the dining table playing a hilariously competitive game of charades, I realized something important. None of us were perfect. Not me, not them. We messed up, we argued, we stumbled over apologies, but we kept showing up for each other, for ourselves. And maybe that was enough. After the game devolved into fits of giggles, Lucas attempting to mime pineapple pizza remains one of the funniest things I've ever witnessed. Mom leaned back in her chair, smiling softly. "I'm proud of us," she said quietly, glancing around the table. "For what?" Sophia asked, tilting her head curiously. "For trying," Mom replied simply. "For admitting when we're wrong and working to do better. For sticking together, even when it's hard." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away, focusing instead on the warmth spreading through my chest. "Me too," I admitted, raising my glass of soda in a mock toast. "Here's to being a hot mess, but a hot mess that actually cares." Everyone laughed, clinking glasses as Dad muttered something about emotional blackmail. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about how far we'd come. Moving out had been my way of proving I mattered, not just to them, but to myself. Coming back had been a leap of faith, a gamble that love could outweigh resentment. And somehow, against all odds, it had paid off. I wasn't naive enough to think everything would stay perfect forever. There would be fights, misunderstandings, moments when the weight of it all felt unbearable. But for the first time in years, I believed we could handle it, together. Because family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it hurts. It's about seeing each other, not just the roles we play, but the messy, beautiful humans beneath. As sleep finally pulled me under, I whispered 3 words into the darkness. I belong here.